In the high-stakes world of the 1%, Sunday nights are for secrets. While the rest of the world was watching football or preparing for the Monday grind, Bob Chapek was at the Hollywood Bowl. He was smiling for the cameras. He was the CEO of a $160 billion empire. He thought he had survived the storm. He was wrong. The call didn't come from a friend. It came from the firing squad. In a conversation that lasted less than 5 minutes, Chapek was told his services were no longer required. No transition period, no dignified exit, just a cold corporate execution. By the time Chapek's car reached his driveway, the press release was already live. The king was dead, and the man who had secretly sharpened the blade was already moving back into his office. How does a hand-picked successor lose a kingdom in 48 hours? It started on Friday. The board of directors had finally seen enough. Disney's fourth quarter earnings call had been a disaster, not just because of the $1.5 billion loss in streaming, but because of Chapek's tone. Investors were panicking. The CFO, Christine McCarthy, had seen the ledger. She knew the math didn't add up. Behind closed doors, she made the call that changed everything. She didn't call a consultant. She called the ghost. She told Iger the truth. The company was broken. The culture was toxic, and Chapek was incompetent. The board reached out to Iger that Friday night. By Sunday morning, the deal was done. The most audacious coup in Hollywood history had been finalized before Chapek even woke up for his morning coffee. To understand the bloodbath, you have to understand the two men at the center of the tragedy. Bob Iger was the architect. For 15 years, he played a perfect game. He bought Pixar, Marvel, and Lucasfilm. He turned Disney into a franchise factory. He was the CEO from Central Casting, tall, tan, and untouchably smooth. He didn't just run Disney, he was Disney. Then there was Bob Chapek, the accountant. He didn't come from the red carpets. He came from the home video and parks divisions. He was a man of margins, not myths. While Iger talked about magic, Chapek talked about yield management. While Iger charmed the stars, Chapek cut the portions of the food in the parks to save on the bottom line. Iger had built a kingdom that required a storyteller to lead it. Instead, he handed the keys to a man who only knew how to read a spreadsheet. It was a mismatch that would cost the company billions. And as the pandemic hit, the accountant found himself in a world where the math no longer worked. But here is the gilded truth. Iger didn't just pick Chapek, he designed him. By staying on as executive chairman for 2 years after stepping down, Iger created a dual power structure that was doomed to fail. He kept the creative control, he kept the board's ear, he kept the Sun King glow. Chapek was the CEO, but Iger was the ghost in the machine. And in the dark corridors of Burbank, everyone knew the ghost was still in charge. Coming up, the $71 billion Fox trap and the moment the magic died. In October 2020, while the world was still locked behind closed doors, Bob Chapek performed a corporate lobotomy. He created a new division, Disney Media and Entertainment Distribution DME. To the public, it sounded like boring corporate housekeeping. But inside the walls of Burbank, it was a declaration of war. Chapek didn't just want to manage the money, he wanted to control the choice. He put Kareem Daniel, a man with an MBA, not a film degree, in charge. The new rule was simple. Creative heads like Kevin Feige at Marvel or Kathleen Kennedy at Lucasfilm could make the movies, but they couldn't decide where they went. They couldn't decide the marketing budget, and they couldn't see the data. The people who made the magic were no longer allowed to touch the gold. The suites had officially put the creatives in a cage, and the key to that cage was a spreadsheet. Chapek's philosophy was built on a single cold metric: yield. At Disneyland, Imagineers brought him a $1 billion plan to revitalize Tomorrowland. It was a project the park desperately needed a vision to fix aging walkways and dormant tracks. But Chapek looked at the numbers and saw a zero revenue project. His logic: people were already paying record high ticket prices for anchor attractions like Space Mountain. Why spend $1 billion to make the park prettier if it wouldn't attract a single incremental guest? He wasn't just cutting costs, he was cutting the soul. He shifted that $1 billion to the Disney Cruise Line. Why? Because a ship has higher margins. A ship reaches a new audience. To Chapek, Disney wasn't a place of wonder. It was a portfolio of assets. And if an asset wasn't growing, it was dying. But Chapek's most dangerous mistake wasn't his war with the stars. It was his war with the fans. Internally, Disney leadership began referring to their most loyal customers, the annual pass holders, as undesirable attendees. Why? Because they spent less per visit. They knew where the free water was. They didn't buy the $15 churros. Chapek's response was Genie Plus. He took a free service, the Fast Pass, and turned it into a paid tax on joy. He reduced food portions to help guests with their waistlines, his words, not ours. He was squeezing the orange until the pips squeaked. And while the profits went up in the short term, the brand equity was evaporating. The Gilded Gates were now toll booths, and the toll was becoming too high. By 2021, the whispers had reached the East Coast. Investors weren't just worried about the math, they were worried about the stink. A lawsuit was brewing. Accusations that Disney was creative accounting, shifting streaming losses into linear television budgets to hide the true cost of Disney Plus. The accountant was being accused of cooking the books, and in a penthouse in New York, an activist named Nelson Peltz was sharpening his teeth. The bloodbath was about to go global. Coming up, the Scarlett Johansson lawsuit and the $100 million mistake. In July 2021, the world was tentatively reopening. Disney had a problem. Black Widow, a $200 million Marvel blockbuster sitting on a shelf, gathering dust. Bob Chapek didn't see a movie. He saw a customer acquisition tool. Against the frantic warnings of the creative teams, he pulled the trigger on Disney Plus Premier Access. The movie would hit theaters and living rooms at the exact same time for an extra $30. On paper, it was a data-driven masterstroke. No middleman, no theater chains taking a 50% cut, just pure, direct-to-consumer profit. But Chapek had ignored a $50 million detail, a detail named Scarlett Johansson. Johansson's contract was built on an old world promise, theatrical exclusivity. Her salary was tied to the box office. By putting the film on streaming, Chapek hadn't just changed the release date, he had effectively reached into her pocket and taken $50 million. She did something no Marvel star had ever dared to do. She sued the mouse. Disney's response was a PR disaster that will be studied in business schools for decades. Instead of settling quietly, Chapek's team issued a statement that was personal, cold, and some say shameless. They accused her of callous disregard for the pandemic. They publicly revealed her $20 million base salary to make her look greedy to a struggling public. They didn't just fight a lawsuit. They burned a bridge with the most valuable talent in the world. In the gilded corridors of Hollywood, word spreads fast. The message was clear. Under Chapek, Disney was no longer a home for artists. It was a factory where you were either a line item or an obstacle. Insiders say Bob Iger was mortified. He had spent 15 years cultivating a reputation as the talent-friendly CEO. He was the man who caught Steve Jobs, the man who hugged Tom Holland. He watched from the sidelines as Chapek bungled the most high-profile talent relationship in the company. Some believe Iger intentionally let Chapek shoot himself in the foot. Others say he was simply too disconnected to stop the bleeding. The rift becomes an abyss, but the Black Widow blunder did more than hurt the brand. It gave Wall Street a reason to look closer at the books. They began to ask, if Disney is willing to burn its biggest stars to boost streaming numbers, are the streaming numbers even real? The rumors started as whispers in the accounting department, allegations that Disney was hiding the true cost of Disney Plus. To make the platform look like it was on the path to profitability, Chapek's team was reportedly shifting marketing and production costs for streaming originals onto the balance sheets of linear networks like the Disney Channel. It was a shell game, a $1.5 billion quarterly loss disguised as a tactical reorganization. Chapek was playing with fire, and as the stock price began to wobble, a new enemy appeared. A man who didn't care about magic or movies. He only cared about the bloodbath. Coming up, Nelson Peltz and the proxy war that nearly ended an empire. In the early months of 2022, Florida's House Bill 1557, the Parental Rights in Education Bill, was moving through Tallahassee like a slow-moving hurricane. To its supporters, it was about parental rights. To its critics, it was the Don't Say Gay bill. Bob Chapek's strategy was simple: do nothing. He believed that Disney, a brand that sells to everyone, should never pick a side in the culture war. He sent an internal memo to his 200,000 employees explaining that corporate statements do little to change hearts and minds. He thought he was being pragmatic. He was actually being suicidal. Inside the company, the response was a mutiny. Imagineers, animators, and cast members, the magic makers, felt abandoned. They didn't want a CEO who managed the stock price. They wanted a leader who protected their identity. The silence wasn't seen as neutral. It was seen as complicity. Under immense pressure, Chapek panicked. He performed a 180-degree turn so fast it gave Wall Street whiplash. He didn't just oppose the bill, he went to war with it. He apologized to his staff. He pledged $5 million to the Human Rights Campaign. And then he did the unthinkable. He called the governor of Florida to express his disappointment. Ron DeSantis isn't just a politician, he's a student of power. He saw Chapek's flip-flop not as a moral awakening, but as a weakness. DeSantis didn't just ignore the call, he weaponized it. He branded Disney as a woke corporation that had lost its way. And then he went for the jugular, the Reedy Creek Improvement District. Since 1967, Disney World had operated as its own country. They didn't need building permits from the county. They ran their own fire department, paved their own roads, and even had the legal right to build a nuclear power plant. It was the ultimate corporate privilege. Within weeks, DeSantis and the Florida legislature stripped it all away. Chapek had managed the impossible. By trying to be neutral, he offended the left. By finally taking a stand, he enraged the right. He had lost the special status that saved Disney hundreds of millions of dollars in taxes and bureaucratic red tape. He had entered the swamp, and the swamp was winning. While Chapek was drowning in Tallahassee, Bob Iger was in paradise. But he wasn't silent. Iger had been tweeting his opposition to the bill weeks before Chapek moved. He was being hailed as the moral North Star of the company, while Chapek was being burned in effigy in both Orlando and Burbank. The Sun King was doing something brilliant. He was letting Chapek fail. Every mistake Chapek made served as a justification for Iger's eventual return. The board of directors, once Chapek's shield, was starting to look at the ghost with longing eyes. They needed a hero, and Iger was more than happy to play the part. But politics was only half the story. The ultimate blow would come from the ledger. As the Florida war raged, Disney's streaming losses hit a staggering $1.5 billion in a single quarter. Chapek, the accountant, had lost control of the numbers. The Sunday Night Massacre was now inevitable. The only question left was who would pull the trigger first. Coming up, the Sunday Night Massacre and the coronation of the returning king. In the week leading up to November 20, 2022, the Disney Board of Directors was living a double life. To the public, everything was business as usual. But behind the scenes, Board Chair Susan Arnold had initiated a secret operation. Its name, Project Titan. The goal was simple: secure the return of the king. The board had realized that Bob Chapek wasn't just failing, he was dragging the brand into an abyss. The stock had hit a 9-year low. The earnings call had been a dumpster fire. But they had a problem. They couldn't just fire Chapek, they needed a replacement ready to step into the light the second he was gone. On Friday, November 18th, Susan Arnold called Bob Iger. She didn't ask him to consult. She didn't ask him to help. She asked him to come back. Iger's response was immediate. I'm in. The trap was set. Now, they just needed to pull the trigger. Sunday, November 20, Bob Chapek was at home. He was preparing to attend the Elton John Farewell Yellow Brick Road concert at Dodger Stadium, a massive event being live-streamed on Disney+. It was meant to be a celebration of his streaming-first strategy. He had no idea that his own Yellow Brick Road was about to hit a dead end. At approximately 8 o'clock p.m., Chapek's phone rang. It was Susan Arnold. Insiders say the call was brutal in its brevity. Arnold didn't offer a face-saving resignation. She didn't offer a consulting role. She got straight to the point. Chapek was reportedly stunned. He asked about a transition. He asked about the concert. The answer was silence. By the time he hung up the phone, his corporate email had already been deactivated. The accountant had been deleted from the system. At 9 o'clock p.m., the press release hit the wires. The world of Hollywood and Wall Street exploded. Bob Iger returns as CEO. The response was a level of euphoria usually reserved for the end of a war. Disney's stock surged 9% in pre-market trading. Employees in Burbank reportedly hugged in the hallways. But Iger wasn't returning to the Disney he left. He was returning to a kingdom with $45 billion in debt, a fractured workforce, and a political target on its back. He had defeated the successor. He had reclaimed his throne. But in the process, the Gilded Truth had been exposed. The magic was gone. Now, there was only the survival. As we look at Disney today, the To Bob's war is over. Chapek is gone, living in the quiet shadows of a $20 million golden parachute. Iger is back, frantically trying to fix the machine he helped build. But the lesson of the Disney Bloodbath isn't about profit or loss. It's about the danger of the Sun King. Iger built a company so centered on his own persona, his own relationships, and his own magic, that it couldn't survive without him. In the end, every empire eventually finds out that the throne isn't made of gold, it's made of glass, and once it shatters, no amount of pixie dust can put it back together. This has been The Gilded Truth.